Welcome back to True Legal Stories. Comment where you're watching from today. In the bustling halls of the Franklin County Courthouse, a lesson in humility was about to unfold. Michael Crawford, a newly minted lawyer from one of Columbus's prestigious firms, was about to learn that appearances can be deceiving, especially when dealing with Usha Vance. The morning sun filtered through the courthouse's towering windows, casting long shadows across the polished marble floors. The air was thick with anticipation as attorneys and clients hurried to their respective courtrooms. Among them, Usha Vance moved with quiet confidence, her modest business attire and minimal jewelry contrasting sharply with the flashy suits surrounding her. She carried a well-worn leather briefcase, its scratches telling stories of countless legal battles fought and won. Michael Crawford stood near the courthouse cafe, his designer suit immaculate, his Italian leather shoes gleaming under the fluorescent lights. He was holding court with a group of young associates, his voice carrying across the atrium as he boasted about his latest victories. "It's all about presence in the courtroom," he declared, adjusting his gold cufflinks. "These small-town lawyers just don't understand the level we operate at." The group's laughter echoed through the space as Usha passed by, her eyes focused on the case files she was reviewing. Crawford's attention shifted to her, his lips curling into a smirk. "Speaking of which," he said, loud enough to be heard, "looks like someone missed the memo about dressing for success." His colleagues exchanged uncomfortable glances, but Crawford was too wrapped up in his own importance to notice. Usha continued walking, unbothered by the commentary. She'd heard it all before, and her record spoke louder than any designer label could. As she approached the elevator, Crawford called out, "Hey, if you're looking for the public defender's office, it's on the second floor. This level is for private practice attorneys." His tone dripped with condescension. The elevator doors opened, and Usha stepped inside, followed by Crawford and two other attorneys. "Actually," she said calmly, "I'm headed to courtroom 501. Crawford's eyebrows rose. That was where his high-profile corporate case was scheduled, a complex litigation matter involving millions of dollars. "Really?" Crawford couldn't help himself. "The paralegal meeting was yesterday. Today is the actual hearing." He leaned against the elevator wall, a picture of smug superiority. "But hey, everyone has to start somewhere. I remember my early days, though I moved up to real cases pretty quickly." The elevator reached the 5th floor, and the small group filed out. Judge Thompson's courtroom was already filling up with attorneys and spectators. Crawford was still talking as they approached the security checkpoint. "You know, I could give you some pointers sometime. Maybe over coffee? It's tough out there for new attorneys, especially when you're not coming from a top-tier firm." Usha thanked the security officer who nodded to her with familiar respect. As they entered the courtroom, several veteran attorneys immediately approached her, greeting her warmly. Crawford's stream of condescending advice slowly trailed off as he watched the scene unfold. The clerk called the room to order, and Judge Thompson entered. "Good morning, counselors. We're here for the Morton International merger dispute. Mrs. Vance, I've reviewed your motion for summary judgment. Excellent work, as always." Crawford's jaw dropped as Usha Vance stepped forward to the plaintiff's podium. The same woman he'd been patronizing was not only opposing counsel but one of the most respected corporate litigators in the state. His colleagues at the defense table shifted uncomfortably, already aware of their associate's massive misstep. What followed was a masterclass in legal argumentation. Usha methodically dismantled the defense's position, her command of both case law and corporate finance leaving no room for doubt. Crawford, who had insisted on arguing part of the defense's motion, found himself stumbling over responses to her incisive questions. 2 hours later, Judge Thompson ruled in favor of Usha's client. As the courtroom began to clear, Crawford approached her, his earlier bravado replaced by visible shame. "Mrs. Vance, I want to apologize for my behavior earlier. I made assumptions that were completely inappropriate." Usha packed her files into her well-worn briefcase. "Mr. Crawford," she said, her voice carrying the same calm authority it had maintained throughout the hearing, "the law isn't about designer suits or corner offices. It's about preparation, respect, and understanding that every person in this courthouse deserves to be treated with dignity." She paused, looking him in the eye. even the ones who don't dress for success. The gallery had mostly emptied, but the few remaining attorneys who overheard the exchange nodded in appreciation. Crawford stood there, his expensive suit suddenly feeling more like a costume than armor. Usha headed toward the door, then turned back. "Oh, and about those pointers over coffee? I hold mentoring sessions every Thursday morning at 7 a.m. We meet in the law library. You're welcome to join, assuming you're willing to learn from someone who doesn't match your initial expectations." That day, Michael Crawford learned that true legal excellence isn't measured by the price of your suit or the prestigious name on your business card. It's measured by your knowledge, your preparation, and most importantly, your character. Have you ever judged someone too quickly, only to be proven completely wrong? Share your story in the comments below. And remember, in law, as in life, respect and humility will take you further than arrogance ever could. The story of Michael Crawford's humbling encounter with Usha Vance spread through the legal community like wildfire. But what happened next would reshape not just Crawford's career, but his entire understanding of what it meant to be a true legal professional. The following Thursday morning, the law library was quiet except for the gentle rustling of pages and the soft murmur of conversation coming from the back corner. There, Usha Vance sat at a large oak table, surrounded by a diverse group of young attorneys. Among them was Jennifer Henderson, a public defender known for her dedication to juvenile cases, and Thomas Gutierrez, a promising environmental lawyer who'd recently won his first major case against a corporate polluter. Michael Crawford stood in the doorway, his designer's suit feeling out of place in the warm, book-lined room. He'd spent the past week reflecting on his embarrassing performance in court, and the sleepless nights had left dark circles under his eyes that even his confident posture couldn't hide. He'd arrived 20 minutes early, only to find Usha and her group already deep in discussion. The key to effective advocacy isn't about overwhelming your opponent with citations, Usha was saying as Crawford approached. It's about understanding the human element behind every case. She looked up, acknowledging Crawford with a subtle nod. "Please, join us, Mr. Crawford. We were just discussing the importance of emotional intelligence in corporate litigation." Crawford slipped into an empty chair, hyper-aware of the curious glances from the other attorneys. Many of them had witnessed his courtroom humiliation the week before, and he could feel their skepticism radiating across the table. But Usha continued as if nothing was amiss, her calm demeanor creating a space where even past mistakes could become valuable learning opportunities. "Now, let's discuss a case I handled last month," Usha continued. "Douglas Richards, would you mind distributing these briefs?" A senior associate from a competing firm handed out detailed case files, and Crawford couldn't help but notice how Richards, despite his own impressive credentials, treated Usha with genuine respect rather than the forced deference he usually saw in high-stakes corporate law. The case study revealed a complex merger dispute between two technology companies. As Usha walked them through her strategy, Crawford found himself increasingly engrossed. Her approach wasn't just about legal arguments, it demonstrated a deep understanding of human psychology, corporate culture, and the real-world implications of every motion filed. Notice how the CEO's deposition responses reflect underlying concerns about employee retention, Usha pointed out. When crafting our argument for the injunction, we needed to address not just the legal standards, but the human impact of our proposed remedy. Crawford thought back to his own recent cases, realizing how often he'd overlooked these crucial emotional underpinnings in favor of aggressive legal maneuvering. He'd been so focused on winning that he'd forgotten about the actual people affected by his arguments. The discussion continued for 2 hours, with each participant sharing insights and challenges from their own practice areas. William Elliott, a seasoned trial lawyer, described a recent case where understanding his opponent's personal motivations had led to an unexpected settlement opportunity. Patricia Gordon, a first-year associate, spoke about her struggles to balance zealous advocacy with professional courtesy. As the session drew to a close, Usha addressed the group with a warmth that Crawford had completely missed during their courtroom encounter. "Remember, every person who walks into that courthouse, whether they're wearing a $1,000 suit or borrowed clothes, has a story that deserves to be heard. Our job isn't just to win cases, it's to ensure justice is served with dignity and respect." The words hit Crawford like a physical blow. He thought about all the times he dismissed opposing counsel, witnesses, or even his own clients based on superficial judgments. The weight of his arrogance settled heavily on his shoulders. After the meeting, as others filed out, Crawford lingered. Usha was gathering her materials when he approached her desk. "Mrs. Vance," he began, his voice lacking its usual bravado, "I've been thinking about what happened last week. About the kind of lawyer, the kind of person I've been becoming." Usha looked up, her expression thoughtful. "Self-reflection is a powerful tool, Mr. Crawford. But it's only valuable if it leads to growth." "That's why I'm here," Crawford continued. "I've spent the past week reviewing my cases, and I realize now how many opportunities I've missed because I was too focused on proving my own superiority. I'd like to learn from you, not just about legal strategy, but about what it truly means to be an advocate. Take the Carter case," Usha suggested, pulling a thick file from her briefcase. "Small business dispute, nothing glamorous. But look beyond the surface." She opened the file, revealing detailed notes about the family dynamics involved, the community impact of the potential outcomes, and the ripple effects that various legal strategies might have on local employment. For the next hour, they dissected the case together. Crawford was amazed by the depth of Usha's understanding not just of the legal issues, but of the human stories interwoven through every motion and response. He began to see how his own approach to similar cases had been almost childishly simplistic in comparison. As they wrapped up, Michelle Edwards, another regular mentee, returned to the library. "Mrs. Vance, the pro bono clinic needs coverage this afternoon." Their regular attorney had a family emergency. Usha checked her watch, then turned to Crawford. "Would you be interested in putting some of these principles into practice, Mr. Crawford? The clinic clients may not have millions at stake, but their cases matter just as much as any corporate merger." Crawford hesitated only briefly before nodding. "I'd be honored," he said, surprising himself with how much he meant it. The afternoon at the legal aid clinic opened Crawford's eyes even further. He watched as Usha treated each client, from the elderly woman fighting an eviction to the young entrepreneur struggling with contract issues, with the same respect and attention she gave to corporate CEOs. More importantly, he saw how this approach not only served justice but also led to better legal outcomes. By the end of the day, Crawford had handled 3 cases under Usha's guidance, and each one had taught him something valuable. The fashion of his suit hadn't mattered. His prestigious firm affiliation hadn't impressed anyone. What had mattered was his willingness to listen, to understand, and to apply his legal knowledge in service of real human needs. As they left the clinic, Usha shared a final observation. "You know, Mr. Crawford, true legal excellence isn't about winning at all costs. It's about finding ways to achieve justice while preserving the dignity of everyone involved, including opposing counsel." Crawford thought about his own recent victories, wondering how many of them had come at the cost of unnecessary humiliation or hardship for others. "I'm beginning to understand that," he said quietly. "Good," Usha replied. "Because next week, we're scheduled to be opposing counsel again in the Blackwell matter. I look forward to seeing how you apply these lessons in practice." Crawford felt a mix of anxiety and determination. The Blackwell case was another high-stakes corporate dispute, but this time, he was determined to approach it differently. He would prepare thoroughly, argue zealously, but never lose sight of the human elements that Usha had shown him were so crucial. "Thank you, Mrs. Vance," he said as they parted ways. "Not just for the mentoring, but for showing me what I couldn't see about myself." Usha smiled. "The best advocates are those who never stop learning, Mr. Crawford. I have a feeling you're going to become one of them." The next morning, Crawford arrived at his firm's offices with a new perspective. He spent hours reviewing his active cases, this time looking beyond the legal arguments to understand the human stories behind each dispute. He reached out to opposing counsel on several matters, seeking to find collaborative solutions where before he would have pushed for aggressive litigation. His colleagues noticed the change. Some questioned it, seeing his new approach as soft or inefficient. But Crawford had learned something powerful from Usha Vance, that true legal excellence wasn't about dominating others or proving your own superiority. It was about using your skills and knowledge to serve justice while maintaining the dignity of everyone involved. As he prepared for the upcoming Blackwell hearing, Crawford knew he would never be the same lawyer he was before meeting Usha Vance. He had discovered that real power in the legal profession didn't come from expensive suits or arrogant posturing. It came from understanding that every case was ultimately about human beings, and every person in the legal system deserved to be treated with respect. Have you ever had a mentor who completely changed your perspective on your profession? Share your story in the comments below. And remember, true excellence in any field comes not from proving your superiority, but from using your skills to serve others with dignity and respect. The Blackwell case loomed large on the courthouse calendar, drawing attention from legal observers across the state. It wasn't just the millions at stake that made it noteworthy, it was the unprecedented pairing of Usha Vance and Michael Crawford as opposing counsel, their previous courtroom encounters still fresh in the legal community's collective memory. The morning of the hearing dawned clear and crisp. Crawford arrived at the courthouse early, his preparation evident in the carefully organized files he carried. But unlike his previous, after the hearing, as the courtroom cleared, Crawford found himself surrounded by young attorneys eager to learn from his experience. But he directed them to Usha, acknowledging her as the source of the wisdom that had transformed his approach to law. That evening, as Crawford packed up his files, Usha approached his table. "You've come a long way, Mr. Crawford," she said simply. "I had an excellent teacher," he replied, "though I doubt I'll ever match your level of expertise." Usha smiled. "The goal isn't to match anyone else's expertise. It's to become the best version of yourself as an advocate for justice." She paused, then added, "By the way, the pro bono clinic could use another regular volunteer if you're interested." Crawford didn't hesitate. "I'd be honored," he said, knowing that his legal education was really just beginning. The next morning, Crawford arrived at his firm to find an unexpected memo on his desk. Richard Freeman had recommended him to head up a new practice group focused on collaborative corporate solutions. "Your handling of the Blackwell case showed us a better way forward," the memo read. "Help us evolve." News of the Blackwell settlement spread through the legal community, becoming a case study in effective advocacy. But for Crawford, the real victory wasn't in the outcome, it was in the lesson he'd learned about what it truly meant to be a lawyer. In the weeks that followed, Crawford became a regular at both Usha's mentoring sessions and the pro bono clinic. He watched with satisfaction as other young attorneys began to adopt a more balanced approach to their practice, prioritizing justice and human dignity alongside technical legal expertise. One morning, as he guided a new associate through her first client interview at the clinic, Crawford caught sight of his reflection in the window. His expensive suit and carefully crafted image no longer seemed important. What mattered was the work he was doing and the lives he was helping to improve. A young attorney who had witnessed the Blackwell hearing approached him after a recent mentoring session. "How did you know it was time to change your approach?" she asked. Crawford thought for a moment, then replied, "I realized that being a great lawyer isn't about winning at all costs. It's about using our skills and knowledge to serve justice while preserving the dignity of everyone involved. Sometimes the biggest victories come from finding common ground rather than destroying your opponent." Have you ever had a professional epiphany that changed your entire approach to your work? Share your story in the comments below. And remember, true excellence isn't about dominating others, it's about using your skills to create positive change in the world. 6 months after the Blackwell case, the Franklin County Courthouse had transformed in subtle but significant ways. The change wasn't in its marble halls or wooden chambers, but in the atmosphere among its legal practitioners. The story of Michael Crawford's encounter with Usha Vance and his subsequent transformation had sparked a quiet revolution in the local legal community. On this particular morning, Crawford stood in the same spot where he had once held court with his designer suits and expensive accessories. But now, he wasn't alone or surrounded by sycophants. Instead, he was deep in conversation with Jennifer Henderson and Thomas Gutierrez, discussing strategies for an upcoming pro bono clinic. The sound of familiar footsteps caught their attention. Usha Vance approached, accompanied by Judge Thompson and several members of the State Bar Association. Crawford couldn't help but remember his first encounter with Usha in this very lobby, how he had dismissed her based on appearances. The memory no longer stung with shame. Instead, it served as a constant reminder of how far he'd come. "Mr. Crawford," Usha called out, "I'm glad we caught you. The Bar Association is forming a committee on professional ethics and mentorship. We'd like you to join us as a founding member." The irony wasn't lost on anyone present. The young lawyer who had once embodied the worst aspects of professional arrogance was now being invited to help shape the future of legal ethics in their community. But Crawford had earned this opportunity through months of dedicated work and genuine transformation. "Before you answer," Judge Thompson added, "you should know that this isn't just about meetings and policy discussions. We're planning to implement a mandatory mentorship program for all newly admitted attorneys in the district. Your experience provides a unique perspective on why this matters." Crawford looked around at the faces before him: Usha, Vance, who had shown him a better way to practice law, his fellow ments, who had become trusted colleagues, and the young attorneys who now looked to him for guidance. The weight of the responsibility settled comfortably on his shoulders. "I would be honored," he replied, "though I hope you'll allow me to continue my regular sessions at the pro bono clinic. There's still so much to learn." Usha smiled approvingly. "That's exactly why we want you involved. The best teachers never stop being students themselves." Later that day, Crawford found himself in courtroom 501 again, but this time as an observer. A young attorney from his firm, Catherine Miles, was handling her first major motion hearing. He watched with pride as she presented her arguments with both technical precision and human understanding, a blend of skills he had helped her develop through their mentoring sessions. During the lunch break, Crawford met with Richard Freeman in the courthouse cafe. The senior partner had undergone his own transformation since the Blackwell case, recognizing that the firm's future lay in balancing aggressive advocacy with ethical leadership. "The collaborative practice group you're heading is outperforming all projections," Freeman noted. "Turns out clients appreciate lawyers who can solve problems without creating new ones." Who would have thought? His self-deprecating smile acknowledged how far they'd both come from their winner-take-all mentality. As they discussed the firm's future direction, Crawford noticed a familiar scene unfolding nearby. A young attorney, clearly fresh from law school, was holding forth to his colleagues about his recent courtroom victories. His voice carried that same tone of superiority that Crawford recognized from his own past. Instead of cringing, Crawford saw an opportunity. He excused himself from Freeman and approached the group. "Pardon the interruption," he said, "but I couldn't help overhearing. Have you ever attended the Thursday morning mentoring sessions in the law library?" The young attorney looked Crawford up and down, taking in his well-tailored but understated suit. "Thanks, but I'm doing just fine on my own. Already made junior partner track." Crawford smiled, remembering his own similar words. "You know, I said almost the exact same thing once. Then I met someone who showed me what being a lawyer really means. Why don't you join us tomorrow morning? You might be surprised by what you learn." Before the young attorney could respond, a murmur went through the cafe as Usha Vance entered with several state Supreme Court justices. The young attorney's eyes widened as he recognized her, then darted back to Crawford with new understanding. "That's right," Crawford said quietly. "That's who showed me the way. And she's still teaching me every single day." That afternoon, Crawford had a full docket at the pro bono clinic. As he moved from client to client, he remembered Usha's words about every case mattering, regardless of the dollar amount at stake. A tenant facing eviction, a small business owner struggling with regulations, a family dealing with insurance disputes, each person's story was unique, each problem requiring careful attention and respect. Between clients, he mentored newer volunteers, sharing not just legal strategies but the principles of dignified advocacy that Usha had taught him. The clinic had become a training ground for a new generation of lawyers who understood that true legal excellence meant serving justice while preserving human dignity. As the day wound down, Crawford received an unexpected visit from Douglas Richards, now a partner at his own firm. "Remember that first mentoring session with Mrs. Vance?" Richards asked. "When you walked in looking like you'd rather be anywhere else?" Crawford laughed. "How could I forget? I thought I was doing everyone a favor just by showing up." Well, Richards continued, I've been asked to lead a panel at the National Bar Conference on transforming legal culture through mentorship. Would you be willing to share your story? The request gave Crawford pause. His journey from arrogant young lawyer to devoted student of ethical advocacy was deeply personal, but he recognized that sharing it might help others find their way to a better understanding of their profession. Only if we can convince Mrs. Vance to join the panel, he replied. The story isn't really about my transformation, it's about the power of true mentorship to change not just one lawyer, but an entire legal community. That evening, as Crawford packed up his files, he found himself back in the courthouse lobby where his journey had begun. The space was quiet now, the day's dramas concluded. Through the windows, he could see the law library where Usha still held her Thursday morning sessions, now attended by dozens of attorneys at all career stages. He thought about the young lawyer from the cafe, wondering if he would show up tomorrow morning. Crawford hoped he would, not just for his own benefit, but for all the clients and colleagues he would interact with throughout his career. One transformed lawyer could influence countless lives for the better. His phone buzzed with a message from Usha. Here you're joining the ethics committee. Welcome aboard. Don't forget about tomorrow's session. We're discussing the intersection of advocacy and empathy. Crawford smiled as he typed his reply. Wouldn't miss it. Still so much to learn. As he walked out of the courthouse, Crawford reflected on how much had changed in 6 months. His expensive suits no longer felt like armor, his achievements no longer needed to be announced to every passing colleague. He had found something more valuable than professional success. He had discovered what it truly meant to be a servant of justice. A group of law students passed by, their arms full of books, their faces eager and uncertain. Crawford remembered his own journey and silently wished them the wisdom to find mentors who would guide them toward becoming not just successful lawyers, but true advocates for justice. The sun was setting behind the courthouse, casting long shadows across the steps. Crawford paused for a moment, taking in the sight of the building where he had learned his most important professional lesson, that true legal excellence isn't measured by victories or billable hours, but by the positive impact we have on the lives we touch. Have you ever been part of a positive transformation in your professional community? Share your experience in the comments below. And remember, sometimes the most powerful changes start with one person willing to learn, grow, and show others a better way forward.